So my name is Erin Lefevre, and I'm going to be sharing my work, Liam's World, which is about my younger brother who has autism. So I first began this project in 2014. I was a junior in college and I had taken a documentary course for the first time, and I just really became enamored with the medium. And I was using it to learn a lot more about the world. I had been working on my first documentary project, which was about a Hawaiian female boxer in San Francisco. But once school had concluded and I was coming back home to New York City for the summer, I decided that I had wanted to begin photographing my brother as a way to better understand him as a person who has autism. So just in case anyone is not too familiar, autism is characterized as a condition or a disorder that primarily impacts a person's ability to socially interact and communicate. I think it's important to note that there's a lot of people prefer different language when talking about autism. So for example, some people who are on the spectrum don't consider autism to be a condition. They consider it to be just a different type of neurotype. Some people do consider their autism to be a disability. Other people don't. And I think it's just really important to be mindful of that. So that's really just kind of like the textbook definition of what autism is. And most importantly, autism is a spectrum, meaning that it does impact everyone differently. So my first couple images that I'm going to show are essentially just what I think are kind of universal experiences about autism. And then I'm going to talk more about my personal process and some obstacles I've encountered while doing this project, and then what I've learned. So in this picture, Liam is stimming with a piece of string. And stimming is basically a repetitive movement. It can also be vocalizations that help people to regulate their feelings and emotions. So stimming can be anything like playing with a string, bouncing a ball back and forth. It can be tapping your foot, like humming a song. And this is just a common behavior that people who have autism do to help regulate their emotions. And in this picture, Liam's talking with our mom, saying I was paying attention and making eye contact. So making and maintaining eye contact is also something that is very challenging for people who are on the spectrum. And if we just look closely, like at Liam's gaze, and if we follow that, we see that his gaze, is actually falling on mom's mouth. So again, and then one of the challenges that I have had with this project is trying to photograph something that is not necessarily visible to the eye. I think that if you have loved ones in your life who have autism or you are familiar with it, you can kind of see it throughout the images, but it's just a bit more subtle. So learning how to photograph a disability that wasn't physical was definitely challenging. So since 2014, I had been documenting Liam's life. When I first was photographing him, it was initially just the singular images. So like right here, there was no white border, no text. That came later on in the project, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically, as I was doing this project, I never really shared it like the first few years. I've been doing this now for 6 years, and it is still an ongoing project. And I think it was just because it's so personal, and during this time, like I still honestly like didn't really understand autism very well. I feel like when Liam was diagnosed when he was a toddler, it was almost like autism was a buzzword. Like at that moment in time, we were hearing this word like autism a lot, but people still didn't necessarily know like what that meant and what it really looked like. So that's really why I began the project, was simply to just better understand my brother as a person with autism. And from there, it just really kind of blossomed into something much bigger. So this is a picture of Liam getting on the subway. So as we all know, the MTA can be a very chaotic place. And the caption says, "I don't take the train alone yet, but I'm learning as much as I can." So I wanted to include this because I think that, well, I know I started taking the subway when I was very young, like 13, 14. And if we have somewhere to go and you live in New York City, like chances are, you're hopping on the subway, hopping on the bus. Pretty simple, right? But I think that when we're talking about disability and autism, we kind of don't really think about how a lot of these places are not accessible or friendly or inclusive of people with disabilities. So, for example, we know the MTA, it's not very inclusive of people who have physical disabilities. Most stations don't have working elevators, or the elevators are not very safe. Only some places have elevators and ramps. And also for someone on the spectrum, so, the MTA, there are stations that are very well lit, some stations are not lit at all. A lot of them use white fluorescent lighting, which is actually something that it bothers people who are on the spectrum because they're very sensitive. They have sensory needs, and white fluorescent lights can be triggering to them. There's also a lot of loud noises that happen on the subway, whether it's people arguing, showtime, loud music, and these are all things that can be challenging for people on the spectrum to cope with. So it's just another way to kind of more subtly hint at, something that just seems like so simple for neurotypical people. We can just hop on the train and go wherever. It is actually a challenge for people who have autism. And Liam is now 20, he'll be 21 in January, and he still is not able to take public transportation by himself. This is a homework assignment that Liam had. I took this photo in 2018. So he was 18 years old working on this, and money is something that is particularly difficult for my brother. He has trouble with, for example, if he goes to the store and he pays for something that's like $2, and let's say he hands over a $5 bill, he doesn't anticipate getting change. And if we look at the center of the image, we can kind of see that as well. So, it's what's 25 cents from a dollar, and his answer is 85 cents. So again, it's just kind of a more subtle way to note that while we might think, again, we know like how much that's going to be, it's still something that can be challenging for people on the spectrum. This is another thing, is also like interpersonal relations. So this is my brother visiting our grandmother. And again, it's thinking about like, how can I photograph something, where the primary struggle is social and communication skills. So as the project progressed, I felt like something was really missing from the work, and that was just a really big struggle to me. As I said, like, I didn't really show this work very much when I was first doing it because it was personal and I was still trying to figure out everything. I had started off actually photographing my entire family and everyone that was immediately in Liam's life. And I think that I did that, looking back, it was kind of like a photographic blueprint, like looking at the entire family and people in Liam's life and thinking about, how his autism impacts them, how Liam's autism impacts him, and just trying to think about where we go from there in terms of better understanding my brother. But I think as this sentiment has been echoed by some of the previous presenters, in photojournalism and visual storytelling, like, people don't always have the opportunity to speak for themselves. And I think that, yeah, as Josue mentioned, there's this kind of trope that like, oh, I'm giving a voice to the people. And it's like, people have their own voice, like, we don't have to come in and speak for them. Like, people are more than able to speak for themselves. Even if people are nonverbal, there's still so many ways that people can advocate for themselves. And I think that as photographers, we have this platform and we're able to share stories and raise awareness for people in a way that I think really no other medium is able to do. So thinking about all of this, I felt like what was really missing was Liam's voice and Liam advocating for himself. And that's when I decided, like, one day I just grabbed my laptop, I made a folder. This is in, I think, like 2018. I just grabbed like all of my favorite images of Liam and then some, and I went to our grandma's house where he was. And I was like, okay, let's look through all of this right now. I want you to select your favorite images from this folder, and then I want to sit down and talk about what's happening in the images. For example, like if it's a photo of you and mom, you and dad, you and your friend, like what's your relationship with them? What do you like the most about them? Can you tell us what's happening in the photo? Do you remember how you were feeling in that moment? And I just began asking Liam to write about it. Unfortunately, I have not documented my process so much. It was really great to see in the other presentations, and I'm like, this is something I definitely need to do more of. But I have like a video, there's no real sound, but this is basically Liam just like looking through. This was when I went to photograph him at his school. So this is him looking through like the roll of photographs, and then this is him writing about different photographs. So I felt like once this was introduced, like that's when the project really began, in my opinion, because it was Liam beginning to have agency over his story and how it was being told. So now I think it's important to talk about like some of the stereotypes that are associated with autism, because it is a condition that does impact a person's ability to socially interact and communicate. I feel like not just for autism, like for autism definitely, but people who have a disability in general. Um, the media kind of makes it seem like that if you have autism or a disability, that you're kind of missing out on these sort of fundamental aspects of the human experience. So, for example, people seem to think that if you have autism, you don't have any friends, and that's not true. This is Liam and his best friend Tyree. They go to school together. This is an intimate moment, Liam cuddling with his mom one night. And I think that when people talk about those who have autism, they seem to think that, you know, they're always categorized as like not having empathy and not feeling emotions, and that's not true. So when I'm starting to make these photographs, you know, like I said, I had my blueprint before, sort of like images of family members and Liam, and then I just began to narrow it down to like, well, what are the stereotypes associated with autism, and like what are moments in Liam's life that I can photograph that sort of deviate uh, from those sort of stereotypical notions. Liam and his mom watching TV together in the living room. When the rain started to come down, I was okay with it. And another kind of stereotypical aspect of autism is the idea that people who have autism are not able to have romantic relationships. So this is an image of Liam and his girlfriend, Natasha. They met at a special needs after school program, and they've been dating for over 2 years now. And again, it's like almost like this idea of autism and relationships, like it's taboo for romantic relationships. I don't know if anyone likes Netflix, but there's this Australian show called Love on the Spectrum, and it documents sort of the different romantic relationships and like dating adventures of people who have autism. And it's they're dating other people who have autism. So I think now what's really great is like we've come, I mean, we're still not there yet, but I feel like from when Liam was young until now, I think that as a society overall, we are starting to have more meaningful conversations about autism and what that is, and you know what it looks like, and how we can have better representations of people who have autism. This is one of my favorite photos. I made a wish that me and Natasha never break up. And another sort of stereotypical idea that's associated with autism is that compared to people with other disabilities, most people who have autism do not go on to pursue higher education. So this is a photograph of Liam at school. I photographed him twice at his school. So he's still in high school. Because he goes to a special needs school, he is in a program that he stays in high school until he's 21. So this is partially because they do like vocational training. So they're training for jobs. That way, when they get out of school, they can go and, you know, have some type of job in the workforce, or some people will just go on to volunteer. And I feel like a lot of people think that the number is low. It's only about right now like 35% of people on the spectrum will go on to college or a higher education setting. And it's not because they don't want to or they're unable to. It's just because they face more obstacles, and there's also not a lot of inclusive programs in higher education. I think that some colleges and universities are really great about taking on people with disabilities, people on the spectrum. There are also many of them who are in certain special schools. So for example, I actually am a teacher full-time, and I teach in District 75, which is a district non-geographical for students with moderate to severe disabilities. So our students are not graduating with a typical high school diploma. So when colleges have these more inclusive programs in higher education, it's able to have students who, for example, are on the spectrum, or they did attend a school like District 75, like a sort of non-traditional high school. It allows them to be able to still go to college and participate and get a higher education. And this is a portrait of Liam. So one thing that happened, I'll share the story behind this. This is actually a commission. Spectrum News commissioned me to make this image of Liam, and it was, I asked him what he was most proud of, and he says, I'm most proud of who I am. So when I first did the project in 2018, like after I began having Liam write his own captions, so the project was shared on social media, and the week after, it was going to be published in the New York Times for the first time. And when I did an Instagram takeover for a photo company, and I had started sharing some of the images on my Instagram. And it was basically just talking about the project and Liam being a person who has autism and what it's like, you know, transitioning from teenage years into adulthood. And when Liam first texted me, he asked me if I could remove the word autism from the actual text captions on Instagram. And I was like, oh, like, why do you want me to do that? And he said that he was a little bit ashamed to have autism. And I was just so surprised because, you know, all this time I'd been photographing him for 4 years at that point, and I never got the sense that he was ashamed of being autistic. And that was just like really hard, you know, as a sibling. So, and then I was like, oh my God, wait, this is about to get published in the New York Times next week. Like, you know, that's when I started like freaking out. I was like, is this, you know, the best thing to do right now? Like, I never had this notion that like Liam was apprehensive about it. You know, I had his permission to photograph him. I would regularly show him images. He liked everything. I let him know that it was going to be published in the New York Times. So it's like he understood. I told his parents, but then it was like once I guess that word autism was underneath his images, it had kind of, I guess the reality was sinking in, like it's going to be out there. But him and I had a really long conversation that day. And it was basically just, you know, Liam, like, you know, autism is just something that's a part of you. You know, it's like the color of your hair, the color of your eyes. It doesn't define you, but it's a significant part of your identity. And after we had a long talk, he was much more at ease. And then the article did go through, it was published. And it was a really positive response that he received. Like, I was really taken aback. Like, I, you know, never expected that. I just began photographing my brother with this really kind of a simple idea. Like, I just wanted to better understand him as a person and just document his life. And like, I never thought it would kind of get, you know, the attention that it has. But my favorite thing about this project is that, you know, my brother went from kind of feeling a bit apprehensive about this part of identity, and as he says, being a little bit ashamed about having autism. And I've watched, as this project has grown, like I've watched my brother's confidence blossom. I've watched him grow, you know, into himself as a man. And it's just really, I just think that that again is the power of photography. Like, the medium is so special. It's able to touch people's hearts and to share information in a way that really no other medium can. So this has been the best part. And now my brother is very public about having autism. Like he will go and tell everyone about my project, and he will like pull out his phone and start showing images. So I think that's really kind of the most beautiful thing that has resulted from this. And even just the responses, like we've had strangers from all over the world reach out to us and like, thank us for the images and helping them understand. We've had people share their own personal accounts with autism, whether it's been someone who is on the spectrum themselves or family members, like parents who have children who have autism, other siblings who have reached out to us. And I think that just having that support and really just seeing this shift of people being so much more open and understanding to it, I think that's really a beautiful thing. And then I just included some pictures of the exhibit at Photoville. So it's right by the Brooklyn Bridge next to St. Anne's Warehouse. If you can make it there, I really hope you can. I'm really happy that the project was able to be exhibited publicly like this. And I think that now really for me, the project has shifted into a more educational tool. And I really hope that, I've learned so much doing this work. I've learned so much about autism, especially working as a D75 educator. I think that having the background with my brother allows me to understand my students on a deeper level. And then working with students, most of my students do have autism. So seeing how autism impacts them all differently also helps me to better understand my brother.